it's not often that a copy surpasses the original, but in the case of this guitar, we can make an exception. This is the 1997 original pre-lawsuit ESP Explorer. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about this guitar, about how I got it, a little bit about the history of ESP and the ESP Explorer, a bit about the lawsuit with Gibson. I'll let you hear what it sounds like, and we'll talk a little bit about the values of these guitars at the very end. So full disclaimer, I'm unfortunately not a sound engineer by any means, so I've done my best to try and really capture the sound of what this thing actually sounds like in real life, but unless you get a chance to play it and see what it sounds like in real life, it really doesn't compare by any means. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about it. It's a 1987 pre-lawsuit ESP Explorer. So if you didn't know, they came beforehand in two forms. There was the MX-250 and the MX-250. And the MX-250 was up until about 1989. And then from sort of 1990 to 1999, the MX-250 was the model. You can identify the difference between the two because the MX-220 has thicker, kind of more rounded edges to these pointy bits. So this one's a lot pointier. And the MX-220 is also a bit thicker. So that's kind of like the Injustice for All era of ESP Explorers that James Hetfleid would have played. And I suppose this guitar is famous for one man, this gorgeous bastard here, which is James Hetfleid of Metallica, is certainly the reason why I bought this guitar all those years ago. I'm not actually sure if it's a nitrocellulose finish or like a lacquer. It doesn't smell like nitrocellulose by any means, and the serial number on the back is 27661. So I've actually written down the date ranges. So between 273 and 294. That's a 1997 model, and there's tons of great information on this website, which I'll link below. So I really do recommend checking it out. So this one is obviously in the black finish. It has two volume controls, one three-way toggle, two EMGs. I think they're probably 81s or maybe an 81 and 60, but I haven't actually taken them out of the guitar to find out what they are. Tune-o-matic bridge, finished in black, bolt-on neck, and yes, ESP did do bolt-on ESP Explorers. Battery goes in this back compartment here. Your typical 3/4 inch jack at the back here. Rosewood fingerboard with the dot inlays, and at the top here you've got the ESP custom logo on the front and on the back as well at the very, very top. And it also says made in Japan here, which it doesn't say on the set neck variants. I currently have it strung with Ernie Ball 10 to 46s. So how does this guitar play? Well, in my entire ownership, the only thing I've ever done is change strings. The intonation is perfect. The setup is the best setup guitar that I've ever played, especially for playing metal music and fast riff music. I mean, this is a rhythm guitar, in my opinion. You can play a lead on it, and it's quite accessible because of this kind of smoothed off backplate, but for me, this is a rhythm guitar all day long, and the action on this guitar is it's fantastic. The entire length of the neck, from fret 1 to fret 22 here on the top string and bottom string, the action is practically and virtually the same the whole way down it, and that is so hard to get on any guitar. The neck is perfectly in line. Like, I play this guitar maybe 3 or 4 times a year. I know that's a bit of a sin, but every time I take it out of the case, it's perfectly in tune every single time. I'm going to say something controversial. These are a better made guitar than a Gibson, and I have two Gibson. I have a Les Paul Standard and an SG Standard, and this is better built than both of them. I mean, to give you an example, it actually sounds really good on not only distorted but on the clean tones too. And a lot of people will talk about EMGs and say how they sound really like distorted and very over processed. But for me, for this type of music, I think it's absolutely the best part of this guitar is the EMGs, you know. You know, it just sounds so tight and crisp. And even when we add a bit of reverb to it, I mean, the solo one just sounds great. You know, it sounds like it's such a good guitar. It really is. I can't describe. I'm not very good at describing how guitars play, but if I could, if there was a perfect guitar, this is very, very close to it. And even when you stand, you know, it sits. I can totally see why James Hetfield plays this, because when you're playing it, your arm rests at a really natural position. You know, when you're standing, you can sit quite low, and your hand will play and naturally just fall into a really nice position. It just fits really, really well on your leg, and when you're playing and when you're standing, it's an awesome, awesome guitar, and I absolutely love it. It's my favourite guitar of all time, and I don't think there's anything that's out there that'll ever make me really want to sell it, to be quite honest. So a couple of things that this guitar is actually really good for is playing master puppets and downstrokes, because you can get your hand, you can do the whole thing in downstrokes, because you can get a hand placement so comfortable in this back kind of piece here. So this thing is in what I would say incredibly good condition for it being 27 years old. There's a few scratch marks and stuff from it being played and a few small dents, but other than that, it's in really, really great shape. I keep it really, really clean and try to keep it in as good a condition as I possibly can. I've had absolutely no work done to it over that period of time, bar changing strings, and usually I stick to any ball, either 9s or 10s. An interesting thing on the MX-250s is that between the years of about 1990 to 1996, they came with a different style truss rod cover, which is described as the Bell truss rod cover. This one is described as the Bullet truss rod cover, and it's from 1996 to about 1999 when this model was discontinued, in and around that. And one thing about all the ESP records and data online is that quite a lot of it is just from people's knowledge. The factory burned down, I think, in like the late 90s, and they lost a ton of records and information about all these guitars, so information is quite scarce. I guess that's what makes them quite collectible and quite hard to come by. They also came in two other forms, which is an LTD and a grassroots version. The LTD is kind of like the Epiphone to the Gibson, and I think they were made in like different parts of Asia, maybe Vietnam, or they weren't just made in Japan, whereas the ESP ones were exclusively made in Japan. So a little bit about how I acquired this guitar. I've owned this guitar since 2006, which is a long time ago, and I bought it on eBay of all places, and this was back when eBay was not what it is now. It was a bit sketchy, it was a bit kind of like hit and miss whether you'd actually get the product you ordered. For example, when I bought this guitar, I had to send away a check, and once that check was cleared, you basically had to pray that your parcel would come. So whenever I was younger, around 15 years old, I used to work in a local fruit shop, and I saved up all summer to try and buy one of these things. I can remember my Motorola Razr flip phone, and I had a screensaver of the headstock of an ESP Explorer. I saved up all summer to try and buy one of these, and eventually I saved up towards one, and I saw one on eBay came up for sale in an auction. I had been maybe looking for 2 years, I'd never seen one for sale. One came up for sale for auction, bid on it, and I won it. And I can tell you, when that red slip came through the door for me to go over and collect the parcel from my local depot, it was the scariest thing ever, because I had no idea what I was going to receive. And when I opened it up and this greeted me, I was literally the happiest man on planet Earth. It was amazing. So I actually bought this guitar for £580, which is about kind of like $700-ish, and that was back in 2006. So I got a real bargain back then in comparison to what the values are now. And I mean, they're pretty much impossible to buy today. And yeah, I guess I just got really lucky, and I'm super happy with it. So a little bit about the history. So ESP stands for Electric Sound Products, and they're a Japanese company that started in the 80s, I think. And they started off doing custom repairs, installation of custom parts onto other guitars, and then started to manufacture guitars themselves. And they really took off when Kirk Hammett and James Hetfield of Metallica started to use their guitars on stage, and that's, to be honest with you, when their popularity started to skyrocket. And ESP are kind of a strange company, because they didn't really design any of their own guitars. They just copied other people's guitars, as what most manufacturers tend to do these days. And this was only one. They copied the Les Paul, SG Strat with minor differences, but this is the one that unfortunately in the late 90s Gibson basically told them, stop manufacturing these or we'll sue you. And that's why these are so rare, so sought after and hard to get. They don't make them anymore. The new design is more pointy. It's kind of lost that aesthetic appeal of it. So they're still pretty cool, but they're nowhere near as good as the original Gibson shape. They kind of nailed it the first time round. I also heard a few stories about when Gibson actually designed these in the 50s. They styled this based on a man's bow tie, which is actually kind of cool when you think about it. You can kind of see the resemblance. And as you know, this is obviously based then on the Gibson Explorer. It doesn't have the scratch plate, which is really nice, because I hate scratch plates on any of my guitars. So really nice that ESP never decided to fit any of those to their Explorers, unless it's, I think, a tremolo version maybe has one. There's a ton of versions of this. This is the, as I said, this is the MX-250, and this is what I would call kind of the Black Album era of ESP Explorers. Beforehand, the Injustice for All, that was more sort of the ivory white 8-fuck to MX-220 guitars that James would have played, and then transitioned on to this, which for me is the Black Album guitar. The Enter Sandman, Holier Than Thou, all of that type of stuff was all kind of recorded, played in this style of guitar. Some of the other variations that I can actually remember when I bought this, about 2 weeks after I bought it, JH2, the diamond aluminium checkered plate covered ESP Explorer came up for sale. That was James Hetfield's signature guitar. They sold so little of them. They're so incredibly rare now. I think it was up for £3,000 at the time. It wouldn't surprise me if it was worth 50 now. So kind of a bummer I didn't buy that at the time, but yeah, you learn these things. Load of other versions of this guitar that James played over the years. One of my favourites is the like a snake bite type one, and there's also a cool checker plate one with a deer and elk and all these different cool inlays and stuff. So, but this one here is my favourite because it's the original and it's the kind of simplest one. It's the one kind of before all the changes were made for all the signature models. Another really popular one, which was the Ken Lawrence Explorer, and as far as I know, you can actually still order custom Ken Lawrence guitars, although I think they're about a 3-year wait. If ever I was really, really rich, I would probably buy one of those and get one custom ordered. So what about values? The values of these guitars are, who knows, you know, they never ever come up for sale. I've saw one for sale, a set neck one of this for sale on eBay a couple of times for $500,000. Is it worth that? I don't know, fair play if it is, but I've actually saw the exact same one of these guitars recently, which is kind of what inspired me to make this video, and it was for sale for I think £8,000 or dollars, I can't remember. I'll put it on screen. So what's the value of this? I mean, I bought it for what, 600 quid 20 something years ago, or 18 years ago. What's it worth now? I mean, is it worth 10 grand maybe? It's probably worth closer to 8, but I don't even think I would sell it for 8. I think if somebody came and offered me 25, I probably still would be very reluctant to sell it, because I just don't think, it's not because that's what they're worth, it's because they just don't come up for sale at all, ever, and it's very, very hard to get one. So So folks, hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about this guitar. It's my pride and joy. If ever my house is burning down, I'd run back in to get it. So thanks very much, and thanks for watching.